This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. In the words of the immortal AC/DC, it is harder than it looks. These interviews will give you a glimpse into the lives of the artists that we've sung along with, danced and rocked out to. Some go deep into their past and others celebrate their recent releases. But all of them show that regardless of who you are, it's always a long way to the top. Cheap Trick have been around since 1973 and they saw their first debut album released in 1977. They've influenced bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins, and with hits like I Want You to Want Me, Dream Police, and The Flame, they were inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2016. In 2022, Cheap Trick graced the shores of the land down under as part of the Under the Southern Stars tour. And I was lucky enough to have legendary guitarist Rick Nielsen from Cheap Trick on an episode of the Bad Boys podcast. Enjoy this special Long Way to the Top episode with Cheap Trick's Rick Nielsen. Rick, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. It's wonderful being a bad boy.
Absolutely.
I think you're the baddest of the lot, actually.
Really, I tell you. Now, you guys look pretty bad myself.
Thank you.
You guys have come a long way since 1977 and your first album. But I want to ask you about one of the first tracks, Taxman Mr. Thief. And it's drawn a lot of comparisons to the Beatles. I have to ask, was Taxman Mr. Thief a direct response to the Beatles' Mr. Taxman?
No, not really, because I was commenting on the U.S. taxes. And, our first record didn't do very well. It's done well since then, but when it came out, the only people that listened to that were the people from the Internal Revenue Service in the United States, and they didn't think that was a very fun song. I got audited 5 years in a row by the IRS.
Yeah, the last time you were in Australia was in 2015. If memory serves me correct, you toured with the Angels. And
Angels and Billy Idol,
yeah.
Wow.
And you've got a bit of a history with the Angels and some equipment that you lent out to them, apparently.
Well, yeah, it's like the Angels. Like we'd liked the band, Doc Neeson and the Brewster Brothers, and they came to the U.S. to do a tour of some sort, and they were foolish enough to leave their equipment in a truck parked on a street in Chicago. Now,
right.
You don't do that.
I called them the stupid Angels then. But they got this. They left their equipment right in the street somewhere, and of course, their equipment got stolen. And I heard about it, and I live about 75 miles away from Chicago, and I heard about that, and I got in contact with them. I said, "What do you need?" And they said, "Well, everything." So I packed up a bunch of my stuff and I gave them enough equipment so they could finish the tour.
Well, good for you. And look, I hear you've got a bit of a history with lending out some of your equipment because you also, legend has it, loaned a guitar to John Lennon before he left this world. Yeah,
well, I did. I was working on the session. It wasn't called Double Fantasy at the time, but it was the stuff that turned into Double Fantasy.
Yeah.
And I brought some guitars with me because the night before we played in Montreal, and we were going to Japan in 2 days from then. But I had this one guitar with me that I used on the session. It's a Fender Telecaster or Fender Esquire, but it had a string bender on it.
Yeah, right.
Country guys use it. It bends the note.
Yeah.
And John said, while we were playing, he'd never seen one of these things. I said, "Well, hey, I'm going to Japan. You want to borrow this? I'll loan it to you." And because I was having a guitar made for him at the time, but we wasn't ready. So I said, "Here, I'll get this later." And so then we left, and like I said, he'd never seen one before. And then 3 years after his murder, Bach showed up at my house, and Yoko would send it back to him. So,
that's
John.
nice.
I think John would have liked you to have this back, or actually, I didn't give it to him. I loaned it to him, but it's like, okay, hey, where's my guitar?
You can't sort of do that after
It wasn't that important.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'd given him the guitar. I took it to New York and gave it to him, and I think that's now at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but you've also got a bit of a collection of guitars. I think you've also got a Sgt. Pepper guitar.
Yeah, I got Sgt. Pepper. I have a John Lennon acoustic guitar. I have a guitar that Jimmy. I have a lot of them. If you go right now, I think it's called The Collection. The Collection, Rick Nielsen.
Yeah.
It's on Gibson TV or on YouTube, and I put that out it came out right before Christmas, and it has over 600,000 views on it.
Wow.
And that's just a fraction of the guitars.
I mean, because you had the famous 5-neck guitar, I've got to ask, each of those necks are set up in different ways so they give different sounds. Is that the point, or is it more of a gimmick?
Gimmick? What are you talking about? they all work, but now I have, instead of being ridiculous,
yep.
I have 3 5-neck guitars, so I'm triple ridiculous. But the first neck is just a 6-string, then it's a 12-string, then a 6-string with a vibrato arm, then another 6-string, and then the first one it's a fretless on the 5th.
Yeah,
neck.
I noticed that. Yeah, the bottom one. Yep.
It's impossible to play anyhow, but it's like originally I wanted to have a 6-neck guitar that spun around like a roulette wheel, and then Billy Gibbons came out with their spinning guitars. I thought, well, they'll be thinking I'm copying him, which I wouldn't mind because he's a fabulous player.
Yeah.
But it's like, so I said, let's do something more realistic, how about 5 necks?
Yeah, that's more realistic than 6, isn't it? Yeah, of course.
And then I just blossomed into one thing. That guitar, the first one I had, the orange one, was actually was misplaced or stolen, I'd say, when we came back from Australia in 19.
Oh, that was 95, was it? That
no, it was maybe the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
It was stolen, but I got it back. I said, that's kind of a hard guitar to fence.
Yeah. It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, apart from the obviously, your first album kind of didn't do well at the start. It did do well in Japan, though. Yeah,
we actually had a hit from our first record.
Yeah,
and then from the second record, we had a #1 hit in Japan only. It was Clock Strikes 10.
What was it that caused that interest? Apart from your good playing, of course.
Good playing and good looking.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't. It's like they just like they liked us.
Yeah.
In '77 we played. We opened up for Queen for 2 shows. Sin Lizzy was supposed to open for them, and they didn't show up or weren't going to make it. And the guys in the band and the management had heard our record even before it came out, like an advanced copy. And they said, well, okay. They said, oh, well, they're good enough to open for Queen. And these 2 shows we did. And at those shows, the Japanese press were there to see Queen, obviously, but they liked us.
Yeah.
And they liked us enough where one girl's name was Ree, and she worked for Dunk Senka and Music Life, and came up to me, would you like to write about what it's like touring with Queen? Like we knew what it was. Yeah. A couple shows. Yeah. So I'm dumb enough and crazy enough to say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And I did it. And shortly after that, we started getting fan mail, and we started seeing in Japanese magazines, which we couldn't read, several caricatures of ourselves, Wow. And then that boosted our fan mail, and then also it helped Japanese people knowing about our records. And then that same year in '77, we did 3 months with Kiss. And once again, the Japanese press were there to see Kiss, not us, but they liked us, and we had gone over quite well at those things. And so it just blossomed from there. And so then by the time that later in '77, early '78, we got asked to go to Japan for the first time. In '78, it was like going to Japan was like landing on the moon.
Yeah.
Like,
such an unusual thing.
Yeah, editors had been there, but it's like nobody. Like I tell people, it's like the Budokan made us famous, but we made the Budokan famous.
Yeah. And this was obviously in the days when if you toured with a band, I mean, that would really make or break you, right?
Well, yeah. How many other bands have you heard that went around with Queen?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and AC/DC and all the others. I mean, there's
we toured with AC/DC all the time, but it's like we were both equally unknown when we did dates with them.
Yeah.
And we hit it off pretty well. We did a lot of shows together.
Yeah.
And actually, I tell people I had Malcolm and Angus and Cliff came to my apartment in Rockford, Illinois, and then drove over to the house that I had just purchased that I hadn't even moved to in '79. And then I actually saw the last tour that Malcolm was on. I went to Nashville, and there was nobody backstage. They didn't. All these country people wanted to see him and meet him, and I was myself, my friend who'd flown from Chicago down to Nashville to see that last show. We're the only ones back there. And I walked in the room, and Angus and Malcolm, "Hey, Rick, you still living in Rockford?" Yeah.
awesome.
Now, I want to also talk about the early days in Chicago. Chicago's, I guess, a city of so many different musical evolutions. Like you've got blues and grunge, and Cheap Trick was right in the center of the whole thing, right?
Well, yeah, we played every place there was to play, and we built up quite a following. We were more popular before we got our record deal. We were doing fairly well, playing some bigger places and stuff. But then we had a record deal, and then we went back to making $250 a night. Opening for people. But it was like, because at the time when we were quite popular is because we were playing to over 21 crowd, people that could drink. Yeah. And so we played every bar for miles and miles, all kinds of states. But I've been playing since I was in high school. Yeah. So in 1968, my band then, which Tom Peterson, the bass player from Cheap Trick, we were in the same band together. We opened for the Who in '68.
Fair income.
And then in a mere 10 years later, we played it with them again.
You released your 20th studio album a couple of years ago, In Another World. It has a wicked version of Give Me Some Truth, and there's that Beatles connection again. You didn't really get to give the album a proper tour with COVID and everything. Are we going to hear some of the new tracks on any upcoming tours?
Well, I've said this almost every interview I've done. Send your song request and no, really. And, we got 20 albums, and it's like, what do you do? We know some of the obvious things to do, but it's like, what would be good? What are your listeners or what do you think would be something to add that would be cool? And we'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, because your obvious ones aren't really, I mean, yeah, they're fantastic, but you've got so many hidden gems there in your albums.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Well, see, we just did we got 4 shows before we come to Australia. We just did 2 of them in Vegas. Every set is different. And we've rehearsed over 80 songs to do, because it's our first 10 years, our second 10 years, and so on. It's like, so there's a lot of interesting stuff. And it's like, and that's just a fraction of material. So it's like, so we were playing a lot of stuff that, God, this was good. We should be doing this more often. It's like, we don't want to do 4-hour sets, especially, but yeah.
Why not? Now, just before we go, I believe that there is a bit of a comic book connection with you and Marvel Comics.
And I know Stan Lee, so there you go. I knew Stan Lee.
You did, really?
Yeah, he did. We had a Cheap Trick comic done by him.
Fantastic.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and I have I got a nice picture of Stan right before he died.
Oh, what a legend!
He came to our show at the Greek Theater in L.A.
Do you have a copy of the Cheap Trick comic?
Yes, someplace.
Yeah. It's probably worth a fortune now.
Well, I'm not going to give it to you.
No. Especially with the whole Marvel thing blowing up, that's incredible. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us on the show today, and we can't wait to see you. I think Andrew's going to be seeing you in concert. I'm in Tasmania, so I don't even.
I like Tasmania. Remember Tom Peterson went gambling there.
You should come down to Tassie and do a solo concert down here.
Yeah, it's not up to me. As long as they're coming that far over, what's the difference?
Well, it's only just across the ditch. I mean, goodness sake.
Yeah, I think one of the Brewster brothers lives in Tasmania.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah.
See, I know more than you do about it. Come on.
It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and please fly safely. You're the first international act coming over here. We want to make sure that you get here safely.
That would be a good idea. Well, I'm not flying the plane, so it should be all right. See if I take a picture of it. You can't see it very well. All right.
No.
Well,
thanks.
I'll look for the comic book. I know I have it. Remind Chris down there, and I'll find a copy and send it to him so you can make a photocopy of it.
Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome. Be brilliant.
Can't wait to see you guys on stage, really.
Me too. It's been a while.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right.
Thanks,
The
Rick.
three bad boys. The three bad boys.
The three bad
That's right.
boys. And four bad boys if you include Chris as well.
Well, no, he's extra bad, that guy.
Extra bad.
All right, you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Long Way to the Top. Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast, and head over to Facebook at the Long Way to the Top podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.